Welcome to Byte-Size Podcast.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving into something really, really fundamental to how we experience life. Dopamine. You know, that powerful chemical in your brain. It's constantly working, influencing pretty much everything from, what gets you out of bed to what gives you pleasure, and even those habits. Well, the ones that can kind of take over.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we're drawing on a really insightful conversation with Dr. Anna Lembke. She's a professor of psychiatry at Stanford, a real expert on addiction.
Right.
You mentioned wanting to get knowledge, quickly but thoroughly.
Yeah, that's the goal.
That's precisely our aim here. We want to sort of unpack the core ideas around dopamine, its impact, give you those, hopefully, aha moments without getting totally bogged down in, overly complex stuff.
Okay, sounds good. So let's unpack this right from the start. Dr. Lembke, she kicks things off by emphasizing just how essential dopamine is, for basic survival. She talks about this experiment, right, with rats. They were engineered so they didn't produce dopamine, and these rats, they wouldn't even eat if food wasn't literally placed right in their mouths. If it was even just a little bit away, they'd starve.
Wow.
That really hits home how crucial dopamine is for actually motivating us to go get what we need to survive, doesn't it?
Really does. It's a brilliant illustration that dopamine isn't just about feeling good. It's the drive behind seeking rewards, which, evolutionarily speaking, are often tied to survival food, water.
Right, the basics.
Exactly. And Dr. Lembke also points out this same chemical gets released during activities we find pleasurable. Could be eating sugar, could be scrolling social media.
Oh, yeah.
What's fascinating and maybe a little scary is that the more dopamine gets released, the higher the potential for something to become addictive.
Oh, okay.
And she also stresses that genetics played a really significant role here. Addiction risk, it's got something like a 50 to 60% genetic component.
Wow, 50, 60%. So it's definitely not just about willpower then. There's a real biological thing happening.
Totally.
Now, another key idea Dr. Lembke talks about is this balance between pleasure and pain in the brain. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Absolutely. So a really crucial finding in neuroscience is that the same brain regions, they process both pleasure and pain. And they're constantly trying to find what we call homeostasis, basically, a level balance.
Okay, like a seesaw.
Exactly like a seesaw. That's a great way to put it. When you experience pleasure, one side goes up, but your brain wants things level, right?
Right.
So the other side, representing pain or maybe a deficit state, it dips down. This is fundamental to understanding why that first rush of pleasure is often followed by, well, a less pleasant feeling, a bit of a dip.
The crash.
Kind of, yeah. But our natural tendency is to seek pleasure, right? And combine that with the just sheer abundance of easy pleasures in the modern world, well, they can really throw this delicate balance way off.
That makes so much sense. It's like our brains are, I don't know, wired for scarcity, but we live in this world of just overwhelming abundance, constant stimulation.
Precisely.
And it's not just the big obvious things either, is it? Dr. Lembke even talks about her own experience. She had an addiction to romance novels.
Yeah, she's very open about it.
Which really brings it home,
Yeah.
How easily these patterns can pop up, even with stuff that seems pretty harmless on the surface.
Exactly. And she clarifies a really important point here, a common misconception. We don't actually get addicted to dopamine itself.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. Instead, dopamine acts more like a signal. It helps our brain evaluate if something is good for survival, and it relates to our predictions about how rewarding something will be.
Predictions.
Yeah. She uses that great analogy of a set of scales again to really show the relative nature of pleasure and pain. It's not about hitting some absolute level of dopamine, but more about the brain reacting to changes in that level and anticipating what's coming next.
So it's more about the surprise factor. If something is way better than we expected, boom, big dopamine hit.
That's a big part of it, yeah. The prediction error. Now, Dr. Lembke also mentions how, everyday activities, things we enjoy, but even things we might find a bit unpleasant, they can all impact our dopamine levels.
Right. And it's not just about feelings, is it? You mentioned Parkinson's earlier. Dopamine's crucial for movement, too.
That's absolutely right. Parkinson's disease results from a depletion of dopamine in certain brain areas, and that directly leads to movement difficulties. But what's really fascinating is how the motivation to move towards something you want is actually linked to that same pleasure and reward system. Dopamine connects them. And think about how easy it is now to get rewards with almost zero upfront effort. ordering food on an app versus, hunting it down. It's a huge shift from how our brains evolved, a really profound shift.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so we've touched on this pleasure-pain balance,
Hmm.
this scale idea from Dr. Lembke.
Uh.
When we do something pleasurable, like, say, having a drink, doesn't matter if it's rum, whiskey, vodka, dopamine gets released. That's the reward feeling.
Right, the upside of the scale.
But then the brain wants to get back to level, that homeostasis you mentioned.
Exactly. So it compensates. It actually reduces dopamine transmission for a bit, and sometimes it kind of overshoots.
Overshoots?
Yeah, pushes us over to the pain side of the scale. That's the hangover, the come down, that feeling of, after the initial buzz wears off.
And this whole overcompensating thing, that probably evolved for a reason, right? Like, back when stuff was scarce, it kept us looking, kept us motivated.
That's the thinking, yeah. In a world of scarcity, you needed that constant drive to keep seeking food, water, shelter, never get too comfortable.
But now, we're drowning in triggers. Synthetic pleasures, social media pings, processed foods, endless streaming. It's like our poor brains just get overwhelmed.
Completely overwhelmed. And this can lead to what she calls a chronic dopamine deficit state. You end up needing more and more of whatever it is, the substance, the behavior, just to feel, well, normal. Not even good, just normal.
Wow. That's the addicted state, basically.
That's the core of it. And Dr. Lembke really emphasizes people struggling with addiction, they aren't trying to harm themselves, not intentionally. They're often desperately trying to fix the pain of that imbalance, that deficit. It's just the way they're trying becomes self-destructive.
That's a really important perspective. And things like trauma or other mental health issues, they can make people more vulnerable, like trying to self-medicate.
Absolutely. Trauma, anxiety, depression.
Yeah.
They can definitely increase vulnerability. People might seek those external rewards for temporary relief, like the brain gets hijacked. These artificial rewards start feeling like survival necessities, even though they're not.
Hijacked. That's a good word for it. And she also mentioned stress being a major trigger, right? Even in animal studies. And those everyday things, HALT, hunger, anger.
Loneliness and tiredness. Yes, HLT. Hunger, anger, loneliness, tiredness. Those are classic triggers. When we're in those states, our defenses are down, and our brain is much more likely to seek that quick dopamine hit, even if it's from something harmful long-term.
Okay, HLT. Good to remember.
And she shared that really striking story about a patient with a water addiction.
Water addiction. Seriously.
Yeah, very unusual. It apparently stemmed from this desire to just check out after she'd recovered from alcoholism. Just goes to show how complex addiction can be and how severe it can get, even with seemingly bizarre things.
Wow.
And she also pushes back a bit on the idea that addiction always comes from some deep trauma. While trauma is definitely a factor for many, she points out lots of people without major trauma still develop addictions. It's partly our wiring, partly this modern environment just bombarding us.
So it's not always about some hidden wound. Sometimes it's just the system getting overloaded by temptation.
That seems to be a big part of it. Which leads to the definition. How does she define addiction?
Right. She defines it as a continued compulsive use of something, a substance or behavior, despite harm to yourself or harm to others. And the tricky part, she says, is that when we're chasing that dopamine, we're often terrible judges of the actual harm being done.
That's such a key insight. The immediate reward just blinds you to the long-term consequences. And again, her sharing her own story with the erotic novels.
Yeah, that was brave.
It really humanizes it. She talks about how tolerance builds up. You need more and more for the same buzz, and how the behavior escalates, becomes secret, starts messing up other parts of your life.
And digital media.
Right.
She flags that as a big risk, right? Because it's designed to hook us.
Oh, absolutely. It's designed to be addictive. She suggests that sometimes just cutting out a problematic digital habit for a while, like a month, that can really reveal its true hold on you when you experience the withdrawal.
That dopamine fast idea, like hitting reset to see what's really going on underneath.
Exactly. And she also talked about the relativity of it all, didn't she? How getting super hooked on one rewarding thing can actually make other, maybe healthier pleasures feel kind of blah.
Like it dulls everything else.
Exactly. Your brain's reward system gets recalibrated to that really intense hit, so everyday joys just don't register the same way. And she also mentioned how the structure of some things, like those romance novels again, can make them more addictive, that predictable reward cycle.
And it's not just, drugs or gambling or novels. Work. She talks about work addiction.
Yes. That's one that often flies under the radar. Work can absolutely be drugified. Think about it. Financial rewards, promotions, Social praise, the novelty of new projects, it's always available thanks to tech.
Nonstop access.
Right, it can create that same dopamine imbalance. You're constantly chasing the next win, the next bit of recognition, often sacrificing relationships, health, everything else. And she notes, even high flyers, doctors, lawyers, people who seem totally functional can have high rates of addiction because of the stress and the reward structures.
It really shows addiction wears many, many masks. Now, she compared dopamine release too, right? Like sex versus amphetamines. What was the gist there?
Well, she said it's tricky to measure absolute dopamine levels in humans directly. But the subjective experience, the drug of choice, that varies hugely between people. What we can see, though, are brain scans.
Ah, the scans.
Yeah, scans of people with addictions often show significantly lower baseline dopamine transmission, even after they've been clean for a while. It points to that prolonged dopamine deficit state we talked about
So the brain is still struggling even after stopping.
for potentially a long time. And interestingly, sometimes when you try to boost dopamine artificially, like with medication for Parkinson's, it can paradoxically trigger new addictive behaviors in some people.
Wow, it's like you can't just force the balance. It's more complex.
Much more complex.
But on a more hopeful note, she talks about intentionally seeking out discomfort.
Discomfort, like on purpose.
Yeah, as a way to indirectly boost dopamine, but without the harmful baggage of addictive stuff. Think exercise, cold showers, ice baths. Ah, okay. Things that are hard at first.
Exactly. She calls it paying for it up front. You endure the discomfort first, and then your body rewards you with a natural, more sustained dopamine release. Because the initial feeling isn't instantly pleasurable, it's much less likely to lead to that compulsive craving.
So that's maybe why things like ultramarathons or ice baths are getting so popular. People are maybe unconsciously seeking that hard-earned dopamine.
That could definitely be part of it. It's a way to tap into that reward system, but in a arguably healthier, more sustainable way.
That's a really cool idea. And it links to what she said about happiness too, right? Focusing on the process, not just the reward. Being present. Accepting discomfort sometimes.
Precisely. That whole be here now idea. It's not about pretending everything's rosy. It's about being okay with uncomfortable feelings sometimes, instead of constantly trying to escape or control them. It builds resilience, a more stable sense of well-being.
And our internal stories matter too, our personal narratives, how we see ourselves.
Hugely important. Dr. Lembke points out that seeing yourself purely as a victim, while maybe validating in the short term, can keep you stuck. Taking responsibility, even though it's hard and might bring up shame, is often crucial for growth.
But validation first.
Absolutely. Validate the experience first, then gently encourage exploring one's own role. It's tough, especially if self-esteem is low, which can create a vicious cycle. And while positive stories help, getting too rigid in any identity can also limit you.
Like the imposter syndrome thing. Feeling fake despite success.
Yeah, that can come from a mismatch between your internal feeling and how others see you. It's all tied together.
So if we're trying to help someone struggling, what's the key takeaway?
Avoid enabling. That's crucial. Even if it comes from love, constantly rescuing someone for the consequences of their actions can prevent them from seeing the need to change.
Tough love sometimes.
Maybe. Empathy is vital, but shielding them from all negative outcomes hinders recovery. Approach it with concern, I'm worried about you, not frustration or blame. That's key.
Okay. Concern, not blame. Avoid enabling. Got it. Now, she also specifically mentioned pornography addiction.
Yes, a significant and often hidden issue affecting both men and women. It can lead to compulsive use, sure, but also really distorted views of sex, relationships. It can sap motivation for real-life connections and pursuits.
And it's so accessible now.
Terribly accessible, even for kids. That's a huge worry. Dr. Lembke suggested a possible link between rising porn use and increasing loneliness and decreased engagement in other activities, especially for men.
Like it replaces real connection with a fake, easy version.
Potentially, yes. It detracts from the effort needed for real intimacy.
So for anyone listening who thinks, maybe I have an issue, what are the first steps Dr. Lembke recommends?
Step one is just acknowledging it, admitting there might be a problem. Then, some honest self-assessment. And she strongly suggests considering that 30-day dopamine fast from whatever the behavior or substance is.
The reset button again?
Exactly. It lets the dust settle so you can see clearer how much it was affecting you. But be prepared withdrawal usually gets worse before it gets better.
Right, it's not an instant fix.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And self-binding is vital. That means actively creating barriers,
Yeah.
making it harder to access the thing, because willpower alone usually isn't enough.
Makes sense. Remove temptation.
And manage those triggers, HLT. Hunger, anger, loneliness, tiredness. Know what makes you vulnerable.
Okay. Acknowledge, assess, fast, self-bind, manage triggers. Good framework. She also mentioned sugar briefly, and that rat study with cocaine. What was the point there?
The rat study was pretty stark. It showed that even after a long time off cocaine, the rats remained highly vulnerable to relapse when re-exposed. It suggests a kind of long-lasting latent vulnerability.
Which is scary when you think about kids being exposed early to addictive things.
Exactly. It really highlights the importance of prevention, especially for kids and teens whose brains are still wiring themselves up. Early exposure can potentially shape those pathways in ways that increase addiction risk later.
But the flip side is plasticity, right? Young brains can also recover or respond well to intervention.
Yes, that's the hopeful part. Early intervention can make a real difference because their brains are still so adaptable.
Okay. Now, before we finish, there was one really crucial safety warning from Dr. Lembke, wasn't there? About stopping suddenly.
Yes, absolutely critical. She strongly warns against attempting a dopamine fast or abruptly stopping certain substances, especially alcohol or benzodiazepines like Valium or Xanax, without professional medical guidance.
Why is that?
Because the withdrawal from those can actually be life-threatening. Seizures, delirium tremens, it's serious. So, for any significant or persistent issue, seeking help from an addiction medicine specialist is always the right move. Don't try to go it alone if there's a risk.
That is vital advice. If you are struggling, please reach out for professional help. This has been incredibly insightful.
Fascinating stuff from Dr. Lembke.
Definitely food for thought. See you soon with another one.